Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at why people on a path of spiritual or transformative growth often seem to experience a lot of solitude.
Mhm.
We've got an excerpt from a text that looks at this, and we're going to see if we can figure out if this solitude is a byproduct of their journey, a necessary part of their growth, or maybe even both.
Interesting.
To help us unpack all this, we've got our expert here, so let's just jump right into it.
Sounds good.
So what does this text say about people being, quote, chosen?
Well, right away, the text actually kind of pushes back on this idea of like some outside force choosing you.
Hmm.
It's more about answering an internal call, you
Mhm.
know, a deep desire for something more.
Oh, okay. So it's an internal shift.
Exactly.
But then how does that explain the solitude part?
Well, think about it this way. When you start to follow that inner voice,
Yeah.
you know that calling, you can't help but see the world a little differently.
Right.
Your priorities change, what matters to you changes,
Yep.
and you might not feel like you fit in with the mainstream anymore.
So is it almost like you start speaking a different language?
Yeah, exactly. And the text even asks this question, have you ever felt misunderstood when you tried to share your deepest insights or experiences with someone close? Talking about that disconnect that can happen when your inner world starts to evolve.
And that feeling of disconnect, I mean, that can be really isolating,
It's
right?
for sure.
It's like you're on a totally different wavelength from everyone else.
Yeah, and the text actually uses this powerful analogy. It talks about seeing beyond the immediate horizon.
Oh, wow.
It says, people on this path of growth develop an ability to perceive things that other people might miss, to see the underlying energies and the potential for transformation.
Mm-hmm.
But that also means you might end up feeling like you're seeing a completely different world than everyone else.
Like you're just not on the same page at all.
Right.
But the text says it's not just about different perceptions,
Right.
right? It also talks about facing some difficult truths.
Absolutely. This journey often involves questioning the way things are, challenging the norms that society holds dear.
Yeah.
And that can be a really lonely road.
Yeah.
The text asks this, have you ever noticed how questioning deeper can sometimes distance yourself from others?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the more you dig into these big questions, the more alone you might feel.
Okay, but is this solitude always a result of asking these questions, or could it actually be serving a purpose?
That's where things get really interesting. The text presents solitude as a kind of protection, a way to save your energy and keep your focus on your own personal transformation.
That makes sense. If your priorities are drastically different from everyone else's, then constantly trying to bridge that gap
Yeah.
can be exhausting. So stepping back could actually help you conserve energy and stay on track.
Exactly. Think of all the energy we spend like in social situations,
Mhm.
especially when we're trying to explain ourselves or our choices.
Oh, definitely.
Solitude lets you channel that energy inward towards yourself.
The text asks us to think back. Was there a moment in your life when solitude helped you clarify your thoughts? Because sometimes it really does feel like you need that space to really hear your own inner voice.
Solitude can be like a mental detox, you know? It gives
Yeah.
you the space to process your experiences, to connect with your intuition without all the distractions of the outside world. It gives you stillness, and that's where those deeper insights can bubble up to the surface.
And that kind of brings us to another really interesting idea from the text, this concept of the shadow self.
Okay.
It talks about those parts of ourselves that we deny, that we ignore, the parts we might even be afraid to face.
That's a big one.
Mhm.
And that's exactly where solitude becomes so important for growth.
Okay.
It's like a safe, private space
Mm.
where you can confront those shadow aspects without being judged.
Like solitude's a mirror, reflecting your deepest fears, your aspirations, and letting you see what you'd normally avoid in everyday life.
Exactly. Carl Jung, he's the one who came up with the term shadow self.
Right.
And he believed that integrating their shadow parts is essential if you want to become whole.
Yeah.
Think about a time when you acknowledged a negative trait in yourself.
Yeah.
Did accepting it instead of rejecting it
Yeah.
actually help you grow in the end?
That's a good point. But confronting those shadows is hard.
Oh, yeah,
And it sometimes feels like being alone just makes it even more intense. Is there another side to that?
absolutely. The text talks about a special kind of freedom that comes with solitude.
Okay.
It's freedom from other people's expectations and judgments. A
Yeah.
space where you can truly be yourself without having to perform or conform.
So it's like solitude gives you permission to explore those unconventional ideas,
Yeah,
to be your most authentic self without worrying about being ridiculed or rejected.
exactly. It
Yeah.
takes away that pressure of having to meet other people's expectations, and that frees up so much mental and emotional energy. The text even asks, have you ever felt liberated by the absence of others' expectations? And that feeling, that can be incredibly empowering.
It makes sense when you think about all the great thinkers and artists who say that their breakthroughs came from time spent alone. Just quiet contemplation and exploration.
Mm.
Like their best ideas popped up when they got away from all the distractions of the world.
Yeah, because when you're constantly being bombarded by all that external stuff, it's hard for those truly original thoughts and ideas to break through. Solitude provides the space for those seeds of creativity to actually take root and blossom.
But let's face it, this whole solitude thing isn't always easy. The text even points out that it can be tough
Yeah.
and warns that people who choose this path can be seen as distant or arrogant.
That's true. It's easy for others to misunderstand your journey,
Hmm.
especially when they don't get the internal shifts you're going through. The text really stresses how important clear communication is to bridge that gap.
It's a balancing act, right?
Yeah,
Because on one hand, solitude is essential for this kind of growth, but it can also lead to misunderstandings and even isolation.
definitely. And the text raises some really important questions about finding that balance and asks things like, how do you handle misunderstandings about your choices or lifestyle? And how do you balance your need for solitude with your human need for connection?
That's the tightrope walk. How do you honor your own path without cutting yourself off from everyone?
It's a challenge for sure, and it's something we're going to dive into deeper as we continue this deep dive.
Okay, awesome.
The text gives us some practical strategies for navigating these complexities,
Great.
and we'll get into those next.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the tough parts of solitude,
Right.
but the text also says there are ways to kind of bridge the gap between your own personal journey and the world you want to have an impact on.
Yeah, it talks a lot about the power of storytelling.
Mm.
It suggests that sharing your insights and your experiences through stories can make them way more relatable and understandable to other people.
So it's about figuring out how to explain your inner world in a way that actually connects with people, which makes sense because it can feel like you're speaking a totally different language sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
But stories can bridge that gap, right?
Definitely. Think about it. Stories can take us right into someone else's experience.
Mm-hmm.
They help us see the world through their eyes. So when you share your journey as a story, you're inviting other people to walk in your shoes and connect with your perspective in a much deeper way.
The text asks, what stories do you have that could help others understand your journey?
Yeah,
That's a powerful question to think about. What experiences have shaped how you see things? What lessons have you learned along the way?
it really makes you think.
Yeah.
And it's not just about sharing information.
Okay.
The text also talks a lot about empathy.
Empathy. So going beyond just sharing your story and like actually connecting with how someone else is feeling.
Exactly. It's about truly seeing and hearing them, acknowledging their feelings, and creating a space where you can really genuinely connect.
The text asks if you can recall a time when empathetic communication changed a relationship or a situation for you.
Mhm.
It makes you realize just how much empathy can change things for both the person giving it and the person receiving it.
Oh, for sure. It's about creating understanding and bridging the gap between people who have experienced deep solitude and those who might not really get what that journey is all about.
Yeah.
But even with empathy and storytelling, transitioning between solitude and being social, it can be hard.
It can.
Yeah.
The text suggests creating rituals to help navigate those changes. Do you think that actually works?
Oh, I do. Rituals can be incredibly grounding.
Okay.
Think of them as intentional practices that give you structure and help you move between different ways of being with more awareness and more ease. Like
Hmm.
you're creating a conscious transition between your inner world and the outside world.
So what kind of rituals could someone actually do? The text asks, what rituals could you develop to help manage the transitions between solitude and social interactions? I'm curious about what that looks like in real life.
It can be simple things
Mhm.
like taking a few deep breaths before you go into a social situation or spending some time in nature to recharge after you've been around a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's about figuring out what works for you, what helps you stay balanced and centered as you go from being alone to being with other people.
It's not about isolating yourself completely,
No.
but being more intentional about how you interact with the world.
Exactly. And the text emphasizes how important it is to be choosy about who you spend your time with.
Okay.
It says that prioritizing quality over quantity can actually be much more fulfilling and energizing.
But isn't that kind of contradictory?
How so?
Well, if the text is saying that these chosen ones have these valuable insights to share,
Yeah,
that they want to share those with as many people as possible.
that's where finding that balance comes in. It's not about shutting yourself off from the world completely. It's about being aware of your energy and choosing to connect with people who you really resonate with.
Hmm.
The text asks, have you experienced the difference between engaging in meaningful versus superficial social interactions?
Hmm.
It highlights the fact that, not all social interactions are created equal.
So it's about recognizing those relationships that really nourish you and focusing your energy on those.
Exactly. People on this path often find that having a small group of close confidants people who get them and support their journey is way more valuable than trying to keep up a huge network of shallow relationships.
Because it can be so draining to constantly explain yourself or your choices to people who just don't get it.
Right.
Yeah. The text does acknowledge, though, that even with those supportive relationships,
Mm.
the path of the chosen one is going to have its challenges.
Oh, absolutely.
Even with loving people around you, there will still be times when you feel doubt or loneliness.
For sure.
So how do you deal with those times? It must be tough to stay resilient when you're constantly facing misunderstanding or feeling like you're on a different path than everyone else.
Well, resilience can come from really believing in your path,
Hmm.
from the unwavering support of those few trusted people in your life,
Right.
or even just from a commitment to keep moving forward one step at a time.
Mm.
It's about developing that inner strength to weather the storms and stay true to what you're here to do.
The text asks, what sources of resilience can you tap into during challenging times? What are some practical ways to actually build that inner strength?
It's about finding those practices and those people that help you stay grounded and centered.
Okay.
Maybe it's meditation, spending time in nature, journaling, or connecting with a trusted friend or mentor. The key is to figure out what works for now and make it a regular part of your life.
So up to this point, we've really focused on the personal experiences of people on this path, but
Yeah.
the text also hints at something bigger, doesn't it? It suggests that the insights gained from solitude can actually impact the collective consciousness.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to explore more in the next part of our deep dive.
Awesome.
We'll look at how this journey, even though it's often solitary, can spread outward and contribute to a wider shift in consciousness.
Okay, so we've been talking about this journey that these chosen ones go on,
Right.
and how solitude is such a big part of how they grow. But now I'm curious about what the text says about their impact on, like, the collective consciousness. It sounds like it's saying they're supposed to bring something back from their solitude to help everyone else.
That's a good way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like their individual journeys of transformation actually become part of a bigger shift in how society sees things, in our values and our norms. They go through this intense inner process.
Right.
And then what they've learned, the insights they've gained, those can spread out and affect the world around them.
The text asks, have you considered how your personal insights might impact the broader community?
It's a powerful question.
It's like this radical idea that our personal growth isn't just about us, it's connected to how well the whole world is doing.
It is a radical idea, and it ties into another concept the text talks about,
Okay.
vibrational resonance. Have you ever noticed how, like, when you're around someone who's super calm, you start to feel calmer too?
Yeah.
Or how someone in a bad mood can bring down the energy of a whole room.
For sure.
That's kind of what vibrational resonance is all about.
Okay, so it's not just some new age thing. Now I'm remembering how quantum physics talks about everything vibrating at a certain frequency.
Right.
Is the text saying our thoughts and feelings can actually change that? Like we're sending out our internal state?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's suggesting. It's about recognizing that our inner world can affect the people around us.
Interesting.
And the text asks, how do you maintain a high vibrational state amidst daily challenges?
Right.
That's where practices like meditation and mindfulness can really come in handy.
So if you're working on being more positive and peaceful inside, it's not just good for you, it's actually making the collective energy more harmonious too.
Exactly. And that can show up in real, tangible ways.
How so?
Well, think about how someone who's full of compassion would handle a disagreement, or how someone who radiates peace would react in a stressful situation. It's not just their words, it's their whole presence that changes the energy.
Now I see how it all connects back to solitude. Those times of being alone let chosen ones do that inner work
Yeah.
to cultivate that higher vibration that they then share with everyone else.
The text even encourages us to think about how our own emotions and thoughts might be affecting our surroundings. It reminds us that we're all connected, and our individual choices have a ripple effect.
Okay, so we've got this idea of chosen ones cultivating a higher vibration and bringing it back to the world. But the text also says they come up with solutions to big problems. I'm not sure I see how those two connect.
Well, think about it this way. When you're constantly caught up in the everyday chaos, in all the stories and anxieties everyone's focused on,
Right.
it's hard to see things with fresh eyes. But when you take a step back, when you make space for solitude and reflection, you get a new perspective.
Okay.
You're able to disconnect from all that noise and see the root cause of problems more clearly.
That's when you get those aha moments, right?
Exactly.
You're not limited by conventional thinking anymore.
Right.
So you can see solutions that others might miss.
The text actually encourages this by asking, think about a time when stepping back from a problem provided you with a novel solution. It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to fix something is to get some distance and let that creative insight come to you.
So it's not just that chosen ones have good vibes.
No.
It's that they use their unique perspective to come up with new ways to approach problems.
Yeah.
It's innovation that benefits everyone.
And the text also says that just by being their transformed selves, they're setting an example.
Oh, okay.
They show that real deep personal transformation is possible.
Yeah.
And that can be incredibly inspiring for people who are still trying to find their own way.
But they're pioneers, showing what's possible when we commit to our own growth and evolution.
Exactly. And they're giving others permission to do the same.
That's powerful.
The text asks, in what ways do you think personal transformation can inspire societal transformation? It makes you consider how these individual journeys of growth and awakening can actually lead to a collective shift in consciousness.
So to wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it seems like the message here is that solitude, while often tough, is essential to this journey. It's the place where transformation happens,
Right.
where these chosen ones gain the insights, the energy, and the solutions that they can then share with the world.
It's realizing that our own personal journeys are about more than just us. They're about our connection to the whole.
Yeah.
Even when we're alone, we're contributing to a greater evolution of consciousness.
This has been a really fascinating conversation.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I hope it's given you some new insights into the power and the purpose of solitude.